The morning sun rose over New Horizon like it had done every day for the past 20 years. Sarah Chen stood at her station in the communications tower, sipping coffee and watching the farmers head out to their fields. The colony had grown so much since the early days. 3,000 people now called this place home. Children played in the streets. Schools taught both Earth history and the new sciences they discovered on this alien world. It was peaceful. It was safe. It was everything humanity had dreamed about when they first reached for the stars. Sarah's console beeped. Another routine check of the satellite network. She ran the diagnostics without thinking, her mind already on the evening ahead. Her brother David was visiting from the mining outpost in the northern mountains. They hadn't seen each other in months. She smiled thinking about it. Then everything changed. The mining team had found something 3 weeks ago. Deep underground, buried beneath layers of rock that had not been disturbed for millions of years, they discovered a structure. It was clearly artificial. The walls were too smooth, the angles too perfect. Governor Martinez had ordered a full investigation. Scientists came from every corner of the colony to study it. Dr. Yuki Tanaka led the research team. She was careful, methodical, documenting everything. The structure was some kind of communications device, she determined. A relay beacon that connected to others across the galaxy. The technology was far beyond anything humans had created. It was dormant, sleeping, waiting for someone to wake it up. The council debated for days. Should they activate it? What if it was dangerous? What if it brought unwanted attention? But curiosity won, as it always did with humans. They wanted to know if they were alone in the universe. They wanted to reach out and touch the stars beyond their small colony. Dr. Tanaka activated the beacon on a Tuesday morning. The response came within hours. A signal, clear and strong in mathematical patterns that could only be intentional. The scientists worked frantically to decode it. Images came through first, beings that looked almost plant-like, with long, graceful limbs and faces that seemed kind. They called themselves the Silvani Collective. The Silvani seemed excited to meet humans. They said they were explorers and traders, peaceful beings who traveled the galaxy seeking knowledge and friendship. They asked permission to visit. The Colony Council voted unanimously to allow it. First contact. Humanity's first meeting with another intelligent species. It was a historic moment. The Silvani ships arrived 2 weeks later. They were beautiful vessels, elegant and decorated with flowing patterns that caught the light. 3 ships landed in the designated area outside the main settlement. The Silvani who emerged were tall and thin, moving with a grace that seemed almost like dancing. They brought gifts, strange fruits from their homeworld, crystals that glowed with soft light. Technology they promised would help the colony thrive. Governor Martinez welcomed them with open arms. Celebrations were held. The Silvani walked through the streets greeting people, asking questions about human culture and history. They seemed fascinated by everything. Children brought them flowers. Adults invited them to dinner. It felt like the beginning of something wonderful. Sarah noticed the questions, though. The Silvani asked about population numbers, about defensive capabilities, about how many ships Earth had sent to establish the colony. Small questions scattered through friendly conversation. Questions that seemed innocent but made something in her gut twist with worry. She mentioned it to her brother when he arrived. David was a practical man, trained in security protocols even though the colony had never needed them. He frowned at her concerns. They watched the Silvani more carefully over the next few days. They noticed how the aliens always traveled in groups, how they seemed to be mapping the colony's layout, how their questions became more specific about weapons and military strength. David took his concerns to Governor Martinez. The governor listened but seemed reluctant to act. The Silvani were guests, he said. They had shown only friendship. It would be insulting to treat them with suspicion. But he agreed to increase security patrols just in case. The attack came at dawn, exactly 3 weeks after first contact. The Silvani ships that descended from orbit were not the elegant vessels that had first landed. These were warships, brutal and efficient. They carried soldiers, not diplomats, and behind them came something worse, ships of another species, bigger and more aggressive. The Korthax Empire had arrived. The colony's defenses were meant to protect against wildlife and natural disasters, not military assault. The few weapons they had were hunting rifles and mining equipment. Against plasma weapons and orbital bombardment, they were useless. Sarah was in the communications tower when the first explosions shook the ground. She saw the Sylvani in the streets below drop their friendly masks. They pulled weapons from hidden places and began herding colonists into groups. The Korthax soldiers were worse. They were large, brutish creatures with thick armor and no mercy. They moved through the colony like a plague, taking what they wanted. Sarah's training kicked in. She locked the tower doors and activated every emergency protocol. She sent signals to the mining outposts, to the satellite stations, to anyone who could hear. Most of the communications network was already being jammed, but the old relay beacon, the ancient alien device, still worked. It operated on frequencies the attackers did not know about. She worked frantically, coding a message that would carry across the relay network back toward Earth. Her hands shook as explosions grew closer. She could hear screaming from the streets. She could see families being torn apart, children being separated from parents. The Korthax were loading people into transport ships. They were taking slaves. David burst through the door, his face bloody. He had fought his way through the streets to reach her. Together they held the tower for precious minutes while Sarah finished the transmission. The message was simple, desperate, everything they could fit into a few seconds of broadcasting time. This is New Horizon Colony. We are under attack. Unknown hostile forces. They are taking our people. They are taking our children. If anyone can hear this, we need help. Please, this is Sarah Chen, Communications Officer. We are human. We need help. If Earth can hear this message, please send help. Please do not forget us. The door exploded inward. Korthax soldiers poured through. David fought them, giving Sarah seconds more. She hit the final transmit button. The message launched into space, carried by the ancient relay network toward home. A Korthax soldier struck David down. Sarah screamed and tried to reach him, but hands grabbed her, pulling her back. She fought with everything she had, but it was not enough. Never enough. They dragged her from the tower. Below, New Horizon burned. The colony that had been home to 3,000 people was being torn apart. The Sylvani overseer, who had first welcomed them to their world, watched the loading of transport ships with satisfied eyes. Sarah was thrown into a holding pen with dozens of other colonists. She saw Governor Martinez, Dr. Tanaka, parents clutching children, all of them shocked and terrified. The ships lifted off, carrying away half the colony's population. Those who had fought too hard or were too injured to be valuable were left behind in the ruins. Sarah watched her world shrink beneath her as they climbed toward orbit. She did not know if her message would ever reach Earth. She did not know if help would come, but she knew one thing. Humans did not forget. Humans did not forgive. And if her message reached home, there would be a reckoning. She held on to that thought as they jumped into faster-than-light travel, carrying her away from everything she had ever known. Somewhere in the darkness of space, her message was still traveling, still searching for home, still calling for vengeance. The message took 3 months to reach Earth. It traveled through the ancient relay network, bouncing from beacon to beacon across empty space, until it finally arrived at the edge of the Sol system. The receiving station nearly missed it. The signal was weak, fragmented, carried on frequencies that no human technology had created. When the technicians finally decoded it, Sarah Chen's desperate voice echoed through the halls of United Earth Command. The silence that followed was absolute. Then came the storm. Admiral Marcus Webb stood in the war room watching the message replay for the 5th time. He was a career military officer, a man who had served in the Martian independence conflicts and the Belt Wars. He had seen combat. He had lost friends, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. An entire colony, attacked and enslaved by aliens humanity had not even known existed. The politicians debated for 3 days. Some argued for caution. Humanity had only achieved faster-than-light travel 2 years ago. They had a dozen warships at most, designed for system defense and exploration. What could they do against an unknown enemy with unknown capabilities? Others demanded immediate action. Those were human beings out there, Earth's children. How could they abandon them? Admiral Webb ended the debate with 6 words. We go and we bring them home. The first expeditionary fleet was assembled in record time. 47 warships, everything Earth could spare without leaving the home system defenseless. They were not elegant ships. They were brutal and practical, designed by a species that had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other. Railguns that could punch through armor at relativistic speeds, missile pods carrying nuclear warheads. point defense systems that could track and destroy thousands of incoming projectiles, and Marines. 2,000 Marines trained for ship-to-ship combat in zero gravity. Captain David Chen had survived New Horizon. He had been left for dead in the ruins, but the medical team that arrived 2 weeks later found him still breathing. They brought him back to Earth, healed his wounds, and listened to his story. Now he stood on the deck of the battleship Vengeance, preparing to lead boarding actions against the aliens who had taken his sister and his home. The fleet jumped 3 months after receiving the message. Admiral Webb had spent that time gathering every scrap of information about the galaxy beyond Earth. The ancient relay beacon provided more data than expected. It contained star charts, species profiles, and historical records left by whoever had built the network millions of years ago. Humanity learned they were not alone. The galaxy was full of life. Hundreds of species had achieved spaceflight. They had formed councils and alliances, trading networks and cultural exchanges. And they had rules. Rules about warfare. Rules about acceptable behavior. Rules that made Webb's blood run cold. Most galactic species evolved on worlds with low gravity and thin atmospheres. They were fragile creatures, easily injured, with lifespans measured in decades. They had never known real predators. Their idea of warfare was economic sanctions and strongly worded diplomatic protests. Actual fighting was rare, brief, and conducted according to strict protocols. Surrender was expected when losses reached 10%. Civilian populations were never targeted. Prisoners were treated according to Galactic Convention, and slavery was illegal according to Galactic Council law, but the law was rarely enforced. Enforcement required military action, and military action was something the galaxy avoided at all costs. The Korthax Empire existed in the shadows of galactic civilization. They were one of the few aggressive species, stronger and more violent than most. They paid lip service to the Council while running a vast criminal network. Slavers, pirates, and mercenaries all answered to Korthax leadership, and they were protected by a simple fact: no one wanted to fight them. The cost was too high, the effort too great, so the galaxy looked away. Humanity was classified in the ancient database as a Death World species. The designation made Webb stop cold. There were only 3 known Death World species in the galaxy. They evolved on high-gravity planets with dangerous predators and hostile environments. They were stronger, faster, more aggressive than normal species. They were survivors of worlds that tried to kill them every day, and they were feared. The Kraknoth came from a high-pressure water world where everything was either predator or prey. They were massive crustacean-like beings with natural armor that could stop small arms fire. The Velshar evolved on a volcanic moon, pack hunters with 6 legs and more teeth than seemed necessary. Both species had been contained by the galaxy. Their worlds were quarantined, their ships restricted to home systems. The Galactic Council had decided they were too dangerous to allow free movement. Humanity was the first Death World species to achieve faster than light travel on their own. The galaxy did not know what to make of them. The few contacts had been brief and carefully monitored. When New Horizon was established, it was far enough from major trade routes that no one paid attention. Until the Silvani scouts found it. Kale was a Silvani middleman. He coordinated raids for the Korthax, finding vulnerable targets and providing intelligence. The New Horizon job had been perfect. An isolated human colony, minimal defenses, valuable slaves from a Death World species. The humans would be strong enough to work in harsh conditions, but smart enough to be trained. Premium stock. The Korthax paid well for the information. Now Kale watched the scanner displays with growing concern. The human fleet had entered Korthax space 3 days ago. They were not behaving like any military force Kale had ever seen. They did not stop to issue demands. They did not broadcast intentions. They simply appeared at Korthax defensive stations and attacked with overwhelming violence. The first battle lasted 17 minutes. The Korthax defense platform had shields, point defense, and a garrison of 200 soldiers. It should have held for days against a conventional attack. The humans did not attack conventionally. They saturated the defenses with missiles, overwhelming the point defense systems through sheer numbers. When shields fell, they used railguns to tear through the hull. Then they boarded. The Marines that poured into the station fought like demons. They cleared rooms with brutal efficiency, using weapons and tactics the galaxy had never seen. Flashbang grenades to disorient defenders, breaching charges to blow through bulkheads. Close-quarters combat with projectile weapons that punched through armor like paper. The Korthax soldiers surrendered after losing 30% casualties. The humans did not stop. They killed every soldier in the station, then executed the command staff after interrogating them. The galaxy watched in horror. The Galactic Council condemned the human actions. Admiral Webb responded with a single transmission broadcast to every civilized world. You allowed our people to be taken as slaves. You knew about the Korthax crimes and did nothing. You created the rules that made us vulnerable. Now you will watch us break every rule you hold sacred. We are coming for our people. Anyone who stands in our way will learn why our world tried so hard to kill us. We are not like you. We are Deathworlders, and we are done playing by your rules. 3 more stations fell in the next week. The Korthax sent a battle fleet to intercept the humans, 20 warships, the pride of their military. They met the human fleet near a gas giant on the edge of Korthax space. The battle that followed became legend. The Korthax expected the humans to retreat when faced with superior numbers. Instead, the human ships accelerated toward them. They traded fire at ranges that would have made other species call for surrender. When a Korthax ship disabled the human destroyer Resolution, the crew did not abandon ship. They used the last of their maneuvering thrusters to ram the nearest enemy vessel. Both ships died in the resulting explosion. Captain Chen led a boarding action against the Korthax flagship. His Marines breached the hull in 6 places simultaneously. They fought deck by deck, corridor by corridor. When they reached the bridge, Chen personally dragged the Korthax admiral from his command chair. He demanded to know where the New Horizon colonists had been taken. The admiral refused to talk. Chen left him with the ship's medical officer and moved on. By the time his Marines finished clearing the ship, the medical officer had shared everything he knew. Fear was a powerful motivator. The Korthax fleet broke and ran after losing half their ships. Human casualties were severe. 15 ships damaged, 3 destroyed, 800 crew dead. But they had one. And more importantly, they had a destination. The New Horizon colonists had been taken to Draymore, the Korthax central processing facility. It was a fortress world, heavily defended deep in Korthax space. Admiral Webb looked at the star charts and began planning. His fleet was damaged and undermanned. A direct assault on Draymore would be suicide. He needed allies. He needed help. He needed other Deathworlders. The message went out on tight beam transmissions to the quarantined worlds. To the Kraknoth depths and the Velshar volcanic ranges. It was simple and direct. Humanity was going to war against the slavers. We are Deathworlders like you. We are outnumbered and outgunned. But we will not stop until we bring our people home. Join us or watch us die trying. The responses came within days. The human fleet held position at the edge of an unnamed star system, while Admiral Webb waited for his unlikely allies. The damaged ships underwent repairs using fabricators working around the clock. The crew tried to rest, but sleep came hard when they knew what waited ahead. Captain Chen spent his time training with his Marines, preparing for the assault on Draymore. Every moment of delay felt like abandoning his sister again. The Kraknoth arrived first. Their ships emerged from faster-than-light travel like nightmares rising from deep ocean trenches. They were not elegant vessels. They looked like they had been grown rather than built, with hulls that seemed almost organic. Water streamed from cooling vents, freezing instantly in the vacuum of space. 20 ships, each one massive and intimidating. The Kraknoth themselves were even more impressive. They stood 3 meters tall on 4 thick legs with 2 powerful arms ending in claws that could crush steel. Their shells were natural armor, harder than most military-grade plating. They breathed through gills that filtered oxygen from water, so their ships were filled with pressurized liquid instead of air. They had been isolated for 200 years, watching the galaxy from their ocean world, waiting for someone to give them a reason to leave. Commander Thark led the Kraknoth fleet. He spoke through a translator device in a voice that sounded like grinding stone. "We received your message, humans. We know what it means to be feared simply for being born strong. We know what it means to be caged by those weaker than us. You go to free your people from slavers. This is a good fight. We will help you." Admiral Webb felt something loosen in his chest. He was not alone anymore. "Welcome, Commander. We are honored to fight beside you." The Velshar came next, their ships arriving in a swarm of smaller vessels that moved with pack coordination. They were hexapods low to the ground, with armored carapaces and multiple eyes that could see in spectrums humans could not. Each one was the size of a large dog, but they worked in groups, thinking and fighting as collective units. Where one went, others followed. Their ships carried hundreds of warriors, all eager for battle. Pack leader Svarik spoke for her people. Her voice came through as clicks and hisses that the translator rendered into clipped sentences. We know slavery. Our ancestors were taken. We're studied. We're caged. We know the taste of revenge long delayed. You offer us a chance to hurt those who cage others. We accept. We hunt together now. 3 Deathworld species united for the first time in galactic history. The sight made the Galactic Council observers flee the system in terror. They sent urgent messages warning everyone to stay away, declaring the entire region a disaster zone. The news networks broadcast images of the gathering fleet with commentary that ranged from horrified to fascinated. Some species celebrated, seeing hope that the slavers might finally face justice. Others predicted the end of civilization itself. Admiral Webb called a council of war on his flagship. The Kraknoth attended in specialized suits filled with water. The Velshar sent 5 representatives who moved as one organism. Together with human officers, they studied the intelligence gathered from captured Korthax soldiers. Draymore was a fortress world. It orbited a red dwarf star, tidally locked so one side always faced the sun. The day side was too hot for habitation, the night side too cold. But the twilight band between them was perfect for the massive processing facilities where slaves were sorted, trained, and sold. Orbital defense platforms ringed the planet. Shield generators protected the facilities. A fleet of 60 warships defended the system. It was designed to be impregnable. We cannot win by conventional assault, Webb admitted. They have superior numbers and defensive positions. We need to be smarter. Commander Thark studied the displays with his massive eyes. The planet has oceans. Deep oceans on the night side, covered in ice but liquid beneath. Our ships can enter through the ice, approach from below. They will not expect attack from their own planet. Pack leader Svarik's translator clicked rapidly. Our warriors excel at infiltration. We are small. We move quiet. We can be inside facilities before alarms sound. We spread fast. We hunt well in enclosed spaces. Captain Chen leaned forward. If you can get inside and disable the shield generators, my Marines can drop from orbit and support you. We take the facilities before they can kill the prisoners. The plan came together over hours of debate. It was risky, complicated, and relied on perfect timing. It was also the only chance they had. The Kraknoth would approach underwater and breach into the facilities from below. The Velshar would infiltrate through the chaos and disable the shields. The human fleet would engage the orbital defenses and drop Marines once the shields fell. 3 species with 3 different strengths, working together to achieve what none could do alone. But they needed one more thing. They needed a distraction big enough to pull the Korthax fleet away from Draymore. The answer came from an unexpected source. As the Deathworlder fleet prepared for battle, signals began arriving from across the region. Species that had been conquered by the Korthax, enslaved and then freed, when the Empire could no longer hold them. Refugees who had escaped the processing centers and built new lives in hiding. Traders who had lost family to slavers. One by one, they offered ships and support. An old Deltharian science vessel arrived with a crew of bird-like beings barely able to handle weapons. They were followed by a Targinian freighter, its hull covered in improvised armor. More came every hour. Outdated warships from species long forgotten. Colony transports refitted with weapons they barely knew how to use. Mining ships with industrial equipment that could be turned into weapons. None of them were warriors, but all of them wanted justice. Admiral Webb watched the ragtag fleet gather and felt something he had not expected. Hope. These beings were not strong like Deathworlders. They were not built for war, but they came anyway, because someone finally stood up to the slavers, because someone finally said enough. He addressed them all through an open channel. I am Admiral Marcus Webb of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. We came here to rescue our people from slavery. We learned that many of you have suffered the same injustice. We learned that the galaxy turns away because fighting is hard and dangerous. We are not like the galaxy. We are Deathworlders. We don't know how to turn away. If you join us, you will face danger. Some of you will die, but you will stand against the darkness. You will tell the slavers that their victims do not forget. That is worth fighting for. The response was a chorus of different voices in different languages, but the meaning was universal. They were ready to fight. The fleet that assembled at the edge of the Draymore system numbered over 200 ships. Most were barely combat capable, but they did not need to win battles. They just needed to be threatening enough to split the Korthax defenses. Webb divided the Allied fleet into strike groups. Each one would attack Korthax holdings in nearby systems, shipyards, supply depots, minor colonies. Nothing critical, but enough to make the Korthax respond. Enough to pull ships away from Draymore. The Deathworlder ships would stay hidden in the system's outer reaches, waiting for their moment. The attacks began 3 days later. Across 6 systems, the Allied fleet struck like a swarm of angry insects. The Deltharian science vessel rammed a supply depot, its crew singing their death song as they died. The Targinian freighter disabled a shipyard's defense grid before being destroyed. The mining ship used its industrial laser to cut a patrol cruiser in half before taking fatal damage. They were losing badly. The Korthax defenders were stronger, better armed, more experienced. But the Allies kept coming, kept fighting, kept dying in ways that made the Korthax admirals nervous. This was not normal behavior. Species did not throw away lives for no gain. What were they distracting from? The Korthax military command made the decision. They pulled 20 ships from Draymore's defense fleet and sent them to reinforce the systems under attack. It was a reasonable response to a reasonable threat. They did not know they were dancing to Admiral Webb's tune. The Kraknoth ships moved the moment the Korthax reinforcements jumped away. They dove into Draymore's frozen oceans, their hulls built to withstand crushing pressure. The water was deeper than expected, darker than their home world, but they were comfortable in the depths. They followed the coordinates to the processing facilities and began cutting through the subterranean structure's foundations. On the surface, alarms began to sound. The Korthax security forces responded to what they thought were earthquakes. They did not expect massive armored beings to burst through the floors of their holding cells, water flooding in behind them. The Kraknoth warriors moved through the facilities like a tsunami, their claws tearing through walls and guards alike. The Velshar infiltrators followed in the chaos. They poured through breaches in the walls, through ventilation shafts, through any opening they could find. They spread through the facilities in hunting packs, disabling security systems and killing guards who tried to respond. They were small and fast, moving through places larger beings could not reach. They found the shield generators and planted charges precisely where Commander Thark had instructed. Captain Chen watched from orbit as the shields flickered and died. "Go, go, go!" he shouted to his Marines. The battle for Draymore raged for 3 days. The Korthax fleet returned too late to prevent the ground assault, but in time to trap the Deathworlder ships in orbit. Admiral Webb found himself fighting a defensive battle, while evacuation ships shuttled rescued prisoners off the surface. Every minute counted. Every ship that fell meant fewer evacuations, fewer rescues, fewer chances to bring everyone home. The Kraknoth ships proved their worth in the orbital battle. Their hulls were built to withstand ocean pressures that would crush any normal vessel. Korthax plasma weapons left scorch marks but failed to penetrate. The Kraknoth returned fire with weapons that shot superheated steam and projectiles that hit with the force of underwater volcanoes. Their ships moved through space like they moved through water, with a grace that seemed impossible for vessels so large. The Velshar fighters launched in swarms, hundreds of small craft piloted by pack-coordinated warriors. They moved in patterns that confused Korthax targeting systems, attacking from multiple angles simultaneously. A single Velshar fighter was insignificant. 100 working together became a storm that stripped away point defenses and exposed larger ships to capital weapon fire. The human ships held the center of the formation, using their railguns and missile batteries to destroy anything that got through the Deathworlder screening elements. But they were taking damage. The battleship Vengeance lost her forward railgun to a direct hit. The cruiser Jakarta broke apart after a magazine explosion. The destroyer Wellington rammed a Korthax carrier to save a transport ship full of evacuated prisoners, sacrificing herself and her crew. On the ground, Captain Chen coordinated the evacuation while fighting off Korthax reinforcements. The processing facilities had been built to hold tens of thousands of slaves. The Deathworlders found nearly 8,000 human colonists from New Horizon, along with thousands more from other species. Getting them all to the landing zones while under fire was a nightmare. Sarah Chen worked beside her brother despite being a prisoner for 6 months. She organized the freed colonists, kept them calm, directed them to evacuation points. She had kept herself alive through captivity by being useful, by organizing other prisoners, by never giving up. Now she used those same skills to save lives. "Sarah, you should be on a transport already," David told her during a brief lull in the fighting. She shook her head. "Not while others still need help. Besides, someone needs to identify the colonists. Some of them are too traumatized to speak." He wanted to argue, but knew she was right. They had found many of the New Horizon colonists, but hundreds were still unaccounted for. The Korthax kept terrible records, treating slaves as inventory rather than people. The only way to know who was rescued was to check every face against the colony manifests. The Kraknoth discovered something worse in the lower levels of the facility. Secret chambers that were not part of the official processing center. Private cells where special slaves were kept for wealthy buyers. The Kraknoth commander sent an urgent message to Chen's command post. They had found children. Chen's heart stopped. The Korthax had separated the youngest colonists from their parents, keeping them in isolation for training. The intelligence reports had mentioned it, but seeing the reality was different. Dozens of human children, along with young from other species, all kept in conditions that made Chen want to burn the entire facility to ash. The Kraknoth warriors were gentle as they could be with the frightened children, their massive claws carefully lifting small bodies. Pack leader Svarix Velshar surrounded the children protectively, their warriors forming a living shield. They understood what it meant to be taken young, to be stolen from family. Their species remembered. Sarah broke down when they brought the children to the evacuation point. She recognized faces. Friends' children, neighbors' kids, students from the colony school. She had taught some of them to read. Now she held them while they cried, promising them they were safe now they were going home, but not all the children were there. Sarah counted heads against her memories and came up short. 17 children were missing. The youngest colonists, taken before the main attack, Governor Martinez's granddaughter, Dr. Tanaka's son, others whose names and faces she knew by heart. Chen interrogated captured Korthax officers. Most knew nothing, but one, a logistics coordinator named Vrax, had access to the shipping records. He explained that the youngest slaves, especially from rare species like humans, were sold privately to collectors. They had been transferred off Draymore weeks ago, shipped to unknown buyers across the galaxy. The records were encrypted and stored off-site. There was no way to trace them. David Chen stared at the alien officer with eyes that promised death. Sarah put a hand on his arm. "Later," she said quietly. "We save who we can now. We find the others later." The evacuation continued. Transport ships made run after run through the orbital battle, dodging weapons fire to reach the surface. The Allied fleet that had launched the diversionary attacks began arriving, their few surviving ships joining the battle. The Deltharian science vessel that had seemed so fragile proved its worth by jamming Korthax communications, creating confusion in their fleet coordination. A Targinian freighter used its cargo haulers to grab Korthax fighters and throw them into each other. Admiral Webb watched the tactical display and made the hardest decision of his career. They could not hold orbit much longer. More Korthax reinforcements were inbound. If they waited too long, the entire fleet would be destroyed and no one would make it home. He gave the order to begin final evacuation procedures. Every available ship was to load as many rescued prisoners as possible and prepare for jump to faster than light. The Kraknoth ships were the last to leave the surface. Their massive holds could carry hundreds, and they filled every available space with rescued slaves from a dozen species. The Velshar loaded their ships beyond capacity, packing in bodies until they could barely move. The human ships did the same, abandoning equipment and supplies to make room for one more person, then another, then 5 more. Captain Chen was supposed to be on the last shuttle off the surface. But when it came time to board, he found himself standing beside a Kraknoth commander, both of them looking at the burning facility. They had searched every room, every corridor, every cell, but the facility was enormous, a city unto itself. "What if they missed someone?" "We must go," Commander Thark rumbled. "The fleet cannot wait longer." Chen knew he was right, but leaving felt like abandoning people all over again, like New Horizon, when he had been dragged away unconscious while others were taken. He had sworn never to feel that helpless again. Yet here he was, forced to leave while people might still be trapped inside. The shuttle lifted off with the last group of Marines and Kraknoth warriors. Below, demolition charges began exploding throughout the facility. Webb had ordered it destroyed, so the Korthax could never use it again. The fires would burn for weeks, reducing the largest slave processing center in the sector to ruins. The fleet jumped to faster than light, just as Korthax reinforcements arrived. They left behind destroyed orbital stations, burning facilities, and a fleet that had been taught a hard lesson. The Korthax Empire had suffered its first major defeat in centuries. The Deathworlders had shown the galaxy what happens when predators work together, but victory felt hollow as the fleet regrouped in deep space and began counting the cost. The human fleet had lost 9 ships and over 2,000 crew. The Kraknoth lost 4 ships and hundreds of warriors. The Velshar lost dozens of fighters. The Allied ships that had launched the diversionary attacks were almost completely destroyed. The Deltharian vessel made it out, but barely. Most of the others died buying time for the main assault, and the rescued slaves. They had saved 8,000 humans from New Horizon, along with thousands more from other species. But the colony had held 3,000 before the attack. Where were the others? Sarah Chen had the terrible job of cross-referencing the survivors against the colony manifest. The numbers told a brutal story. Nearly 1,000 New Horizon colonists were dead, killed during the initial attack or during processing. Another 500 were unaccounted for, sold privately before the rescue, and 17 children were missing. Governor Martinez had not survived. He died during the initial attack, fighting the Silvani who had betrayed them. Dr. Tanaka was found, but her son was one of the missing children. She sat in the medical bay staring at nothing, alive but broken. Admiral Webb called a meeting of the Deathworlder commanders. They gathered in the conference room of the flagship, 3 species who had learned to work together through fire and blood. They had won a victory that would reshape the galaxy. But sitting there looking at the casualty reports and the lists of missing, it was hard to feel victorious. "We saved thousands," Commander Thark said, his voice like grinding gravel. "That is worth the cost." But not all. Pack leader Svarik clicked through her translator. "The young ones still missing. Sold to hidden buyers. Lost in the dark places of the galaxy." Webb nodded slowly. "We can't stop here. Those children deserve to go home. Everyone sold by the Korthax deserves freedom. But we are damaged, low on supplies, and the galaxy is watching to see what we do next." The news of the Draymore raid spread across the galaxy like a shockwave. Every species, every government, every news network broadcast images of the burning facility and the rescued slaves. The Galactic Council convened emergency sessions. Some representatives called for sanctions against the Deathworlders. Others argued for accommodation. A few, very quietly, expressed gratitude that someone had finally done what they could not. The Korthax Empire collapsed within weeks. The species they had conquered for centuries saw weakness and rebelled. Trade partners cut ties. Criminal networks that had operated under Korthax protection scattered. The empire that had terrorized the sector for generations fell apart because 3 Deathworld species showed them what real predators looked like. Admiral Webb became the reluctant face of the Deathworlder Compact. He did not want fame or glory. He wanted to find the missing children and go home. But the galaxy demanded a representative, someone to explain what the Deathworlders intended to do next. So he gave interviews, answered questions, and tried to make politicians understand that there were some evils worth fighting. The Galactic Council summoned him to their chambers on the capital world of Centris Prime. Webb went, accompanied by Commander Thark and Pack Leader Sazvarik. The 3 of them stood before the assembled representatives of 200 species and listened to speeches about violations of galactic law, unauthorized military action, and excessive use of force. Webb waited until they finished. Then he played a recording. It was footage from the Draymore facility, children in cages, beings beaten for disobedience, records showing thousands of slaves processed and sold like cargo, bodies of those who did not survive. The council chambers fell silent. "You made laws against slavery," Webb said quietly, "but you never enforced them. You made rules about warfare, about acceptable behavior, about civilized conduct. But you let the Korthax break every rule because stopping them was hard. You condemned us for fighting back. But where were you when our colony was attacked? Where were you when children were stolen? Where were you when thousands of beings suffered in those facilities?" No one answered. No one could. The truth was too heavy to deny. "We are Deathworlders," Webb continued. "We evolved on worlds that tried to kill us every day. We learned to fight because not fighting meant extinction. You fear us because we are different, Because we are willing to do what you cannot, but we are not your enemy. We are what happens when you ignore evil for so long that someone else has to face it. The Deathworlder Compact will continue to operate. We will hunt slavers. We will free prisoners. We will protect those who cannot protect themselves. You can work with us or stay out of our way, but we will not stop. Because we made a promise, and Deathworlders keep their promises. The Council debated for weeks. In the end, they issued a statement recognizing the Deathworlder Compact as a legitimate military alliance. They did not have much choice. Public opinion across the galaxy supported the Deathworlders. Species that had lost people to slavers sent messages of thanks. The Allied fleet survivors were treated as heroes on their homeworlds. Even traditional politicians recognized that opposing the compact would be political suicide. The humans, Kraknoth and Velshar, began building something permanent. A joint military force with ships from all three species, training programs where they taught each other tactics and strategies, intelligence networks dedicated to tracking slavers and criminal organizations. They established a base on a world claimed by none of the founding species, a place where all three could work together as equals. Sarah Chen became the intelligence director of the compact. Her time in captivity had taught her how the slave networks operated. She knew the methods, the routes, the contacts. She spent her days hunting through databases and interrogating captured slavers, building a map of every criminal network in the sector. And she was searching, always searching. For the 17 children who were still missing, Captain David Chen commanded the 1st Integrated Strike Force, a unit combining human Marines, Kraknoth warriors, and Velshar hunters. They became the tip of the spear for compact operations, conducting raids on slaver bases and criminal hideouts. They freed thousands over the following months. But the 17 children from New Horizon remained missing. The psychological cost weighed heavily. Sarah woke screaming from nightmares most nights. David watched his sister struggle and could do nothing but be there for her. The rescued colonists tried to rebuild their lives, but many carried scars that would never heal. Dr. Tanaka spent every waking hour helping Sarah search for the missing children, hoping to find her son, afraid of what they might find instead. 6 months after Draymore, Sarah found a lead. A transaction record from a data cache recovered during a raid on a Sylvani smuggling ring. 3 human children sold to a collector on the rim world of Vastian Minor. The record was incomplete, but it was something. It was hope. The compact sent a team immediately. David led the Marines while Kraknoth and Velshar forces provided support. Vastian Minor was technically outside Galactic Council jurisdiction, a world where criminals could operate openly as long as they paid the local warlords. The compact did not care about jurisdiction. They found the collector's estate heavily guarded, private security forces with military-grade weapons, defense systems that could have protected a small military base. The collector, a being named Thavix, had made a fortune buying and selling rare specimens. Living beings kept as curiosities, displayed like art for wealthy guests to admire. The Velshar infiltrated first, moving through the estate's ventilation and maintenance tunnels. They disabled security systems and marked targets. The Kraknoth came next, their warriors breaching through the estate's foundation and coming up through the floors. David's Marines hit the main entrance simultaneously, overwhelming the guards through coordinated violence. They found Thavix's collection in the sublevels, cages holding dozens of beings from rare species, kept in conditions that made David sick, and in 3 separate cells they found human children, Governor Martinez's granddaughter, now 7 years old, who barely remembered her family, a boy named Marcus who had been 5 when taken, now unable to speak his own language, a girl named Jenny who screamed when the Marines tried to approach her. David knelt outside Jenny's cage and spoke softly. "It's okay. We are here to take you home. Your parents are waiting. You are safe now." She stared at him with eyes that had seen too much. "Promise?" "I promise," David said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. They recovered 14 children from various operations over the next year. Each rescue was a victory. Each child returned was another promise kept. But 3 children were never found. The records led to dead ends. The trails went cold. Despite all their resources, all their determination, some promises could not be kept. Dr. Tanaka never found her son. She continued working with Sarah, continued searching, but the hope in her eyes dimmed with each passing month. Eventually, she asked to be assigned to the Compact's medical division. helping rehabilitate rescued slaves instead of searching for ghosts. Sarah understood. Sometimes you have to let go of what you cannot change to focus on what you can. The Deathworlder Compact grew stronger. More ships were built to compact specifications, combining the best technology from all three species. They established protocols for responding to distress calls, procedures for freeing slaves, and systems for rehabilitating rescued beings. They became what the galaxy needed but had been too afraid to create. A force that protected the vulnerable and punished the predators. Other species began asking to join, not as full members but as allies and associates. The Deltharian survivors who had fought at Draymore wanted to continue the mission. Freed slaves who had nowhere else to go volunteered for training. Slowly, the compact expanded beyond the three Deathworld species to include anyone willing to stand against slavery and oppression. Admiral Webb remained in command, though he felt every one of his years. He had come searching for one colony and started a movement that changed the galaxy. He met with Sarah Chen regularly, reviewing intelligence and planning operations. She had become one of his most trusted advisors, her experience and determination invaluable. "We found another processing center," Sarah told him during one meeting. "Smaller than Draymore, but still holding hundreds. The local authorities know about it, but look away because the owners pay well." "Then we make them look," Webb said simply. "Send the first strike force, show the locals that corruption has consequences." Sarah smiled. It was not a happy expression. It was the smile of someone who had learned that justice sometimes requires violence. "Already moving. David wants to leave tonight." 2 years after the first distress call from New Horizon, everything changed again. The compact received a new signal. Not from humans this time. A Deltharian science station on the edge of explored space under attack by pirates who had heard about the lucrative slave trade. The Deltharians were helpless, their ships unarmed, their people trained for research, not combat. The pirates broadcast their demands to the station. Surrender and cooperation would mean becoming slaves. Resistance would mean death. They gave the Deltharians 1 hour to decide. Sarah Chen was monitoring communications when the distress call came through.